Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. There are some stories we hope we never have to tell again. This is one of them. A new disease outbreak in China, hospitals overwhelmed and Beijing not sharing information while downplaying it as just another flu. So how serious is it this time and what can the world do? We'll bring you the details that we could gather. Meanwhile in Russia, Bashar al-Assad was apparently poisoned. We are talking about the deposed Syrian leader. Also in focus is the US planning to attack Iran's nuclear sites, how investigators failed to arrest South Korea's impeached president today. There was a fair bit of drama there. Why Tesla car sales have dropped for the first time in more than 10 years. Why the government of India is investigating Elon Musk's Starlink. Why the Venezuelan president has announced a bounty on the opposition leader. Do diamonds make for good investments? What about luxury watches and bags? Why Slovakia has threatened Ukraine and how a killer whale is grieving the death of its child and carrying its body around. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. India slams China's move to set up counties in parts of Ladakh. Beijing's new counties cover land illegally occupied by China. New Delhi has lodged an official protest with Beijing. This marks the first sign of friction between the two neighbors since last year's border deal. Joe Biden blocks the sale of U.S. steel to Japan's Nippon Steel. U.S. Steel is one of America's largest steel producers. The U.S. president cites national security as the reason. Nippon Steel had earlier proposed to buy the company for nearly $15 billion. Malaysia detains nearly 200 Rohingya migrants from Myanmar. This was after their boat landed on the resort island of Langkawi. Malaysia now plans to double its patrols to locate more such unidentified migrant boats. Thailand's Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra declares more than 400 million in assets. This includes more than 200 designer bags worth over $2 million and 75 luxury watches valued at almost $5 million. Her father, Thaksin Shinawatra, is the 10th richest person in Thailand. And the US wants cancer warnings for alcoholic drinks. The US Surgeon General calls for a reassessment of alcohol consumption guidelines. A US report links alcohol to 7 types of cancer, but most alcoholic drinks come without any warnings. I hate to say this, but it feels like 2020 all over again. Overflowing hospitals and thousands of patients with flu-like symptoms. China is facing a new health crisis, a new disease outbreak, which looks a lot like the Wuhan virus. And as always, Beijing is sharing no information. They're calling it a pneumonia of unknown origin. That's how Chinese authorities have described it. Beijing says it has set up systems to monitor the outbreak. If you feel like you've heard this before, you have. From the same China, some 4 years back. They're making it sound like it's just the flu season. We do hope it's just that. But sadly, the pictures tell a different story. Take a look at this. This is believed to be from a hospital in China. We cannot verify these pictures, but several videos like this one are going viral. Clearly, there is more to the story. We do not wish to speculate and feed the fear, but here is what we know so far. This is not a new disease. Experts say that China is dealing with an outbreak of HMPV. That's the human metapneumovirus, HMPV. This virus has been around for at least 60 years. It is quite common and easy to catch. So unlike the Wuhan virus, this time they seem to be dealing with a known disease, and yet there are reasons to be worried. The first reason is the scale of the outbreak. It is massive. Cases have been reported in multiple cities across China: Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei, Shaanxi, and Inner Mongolia. These 5 areas have reported the highest number of cases. But we don't know about the actual caseload. As usual, China has not shared any data, so we don't know how much worse it could become. The second reason to be worried is the nature of the patients. HMPV attacks the younger sections of the population, the children and adolescents. They are the most vulnerable to contracting this virus, and a large number of patients right now are also children. Plus, treatment is also challenging because just like the Wuhan virus, the HMPV is a respiratory disease. There is no drug to treat it. There are no vaccines either. And the symptoms are similar: fever, cough, and shortness of breath. That's what HMPV patients have. In severe cases, they can develop other complications like bronchitis or pneumonia. So they may need intensive care, oxygen, or even a ventilator. Again, does this sound familiar to you? We all know what happens when hospitals are overwhelmed, when there are too many patients to treat and not enough resources, when oxygen supplies are about to run out, when patients cannot find beds for treatment. HMPV is not the same as the Wuhan virus, but it can easily wreak havoc on the health system. China knows this too. In fact, its hospitals are already feeling the strain. Despite that, it refuses to come clean about the outbreak or its scale. It seems to have learned nothing from the last pandemic. It remains in a state of denial. Just look at this story. It came out 3 days back. The World Health Organization, or WHO, made an appeal to Beijing. It has asked China to come clean about the Wuhan virus pandemic. The WHO has sought data from Beijing. And how did Beijing respond? With a denial.
On the issue of COVID-19 traceability, China has always upheld the spirit of scientific openness and transparency as it actively supported participation in the global scientific traceability methods. At the same time, we firmly oppose any form of political manipulation. China's openness and transparency have exceeded expectations.
They say they have exceeded expectations. Does the WHO agree with that? In 2023, a WHO official was asked about this. He said, and I quote, "China's lack of data disclosure is simply inexcusable." And this is a sharp shift in the stand of the World Health Organization. In the early days of the pandemic, they had praised China's response to the Wuhan virus. We all know what a disaster it turned out to be. The world cannot afford a repeat of the same mistake. It must remain vigilant about China's latest disease outbreak. Bashar al-Assad has lost his country, but if reports are true, he nearly lost his life too. That's right, Assad was reportedly poisoned in Russia. It is said to have happened last Sunday. We don't have official confirmation from the Russians yet, but this is how things apparently unfolded. First, Assad began feeling a bit unwell, so he decided to seek medical help. As soon as he called for it, Assad began coughing and choking pretty violently, as per reports. He was treated at his apartment in Moscow, and by Monday, he's said to have stabilised. Later, tests were conducted, and they reveal the presence of poison in his system. This is all that we know at this point. It's not clear who might have poisoned Bashar al-Assad, how he ingested it, and how he survived. But you have to admit that this is box office stuff: a deposed West Asian dictator, an unknown apartment in Moscow, and a mysterious poisoning attempt. The script writes itself. But let's not get carried away with the headline. Instead, let's look at what we know. Assad fled to Moscow early last month. The Syrian rebels were closing on his capital, Damascus. So Assad and his family packed up and left. They sought refuge in Moscow. President Putin had been supporting Assad in the civil war, so he agreed to host the exiled family. Since then, we haven't heard a lot about them. What we did hear was speculation. One report said that Assad's wife is seeking a divorce. Her name is Asma al-Assad. Apparently, she wants to live in Britain, where she was born. Just one problem, though. London has refused to welcome Assad and his family. So reports said Asma wanted a divorce. Eventually, the Kremlin denied these reports. Let's see if a similar clarification comes this time about the poisoning. But for now, let's assume that this report is true. Who would want to kill Bashar al-Assad? Frankly, a lot of people. He had enemies at home, in the West, and in the Arab world. The Syrian rebels have every reason to hunt Assad. He used chemical weapons on them. He unleashed carpet bombing on their cities and jailed thousands of critics. So the rebels would love to get even. They've already arrested 300 Assad loyalists. The plan is to try and punish them. But do they have the resources to poison Assad in Moscow? Right now, they don't. Plus, their plate is full as it is. The rebels are trying to stabilize the country. They're also facing airstrikes from Israel. They neither have the time nor the resources for such an operation. And frankly, it's not just about who did it, it's also about where it happened. It happened in Moscow, right under Vladimir Putin's nose. Assad would have expected to be safe in the Russian capital. His family owns 20 apartments there. His eldest son studied at a Moscow university, and they often vacation in Crimea. On paper, this was a very tight relationship. Yet Putin and Assad were never close, which is a bit strange because the Russian president is known for forging close personal bonds. We've seen him eating ice cream with Turkey's Erdogan, playing ice hockey with Lukashenko, and vacationing with a handful of European leaders. But he did none of that with Bashar al-Assad. And when Damascus fell, Russia was reportedly livid. They had long asked Assad to make concessions, to reform and bolster the army. But Assad refused to do any of that. And some of that frustration was evident from Moscow, like at Putin's annual presser. It was held 10 days after Assad had fled to Russia. Yet Putin said he hadn't met him yet.
To be honest, I have not yet seen President Assad after he arrived in Moscow, but I plan to do it. I will surely speak to him.
It's been another 10 days. Moscow is yet to report a meeting between Assad and Putin. And now this report of an assassination bid. It will be interesting to see how Russia reacts to this news. That could give us clues on what actually happened. "17 days. That's all that's left in Joe Biden's presidency. At this point, your job is quite simple. Stay out of the news. Don't make big decisions and help your successor move in. But Joe Biden has been up to a lot more. Reports say that he is discussing airstrikes on Iran's nuclear sites. It dates back to a meeting with Jake Sullivan, who is Biden's national security advisor. The meeting is said to have happened a few weeks ago. Sullivan presented Biden with options for a potential attack. And how did Biden respond? He decided not to approve any military action. Since then, he hasn't changed that position either. But Biden's team is not convinced. Some of his officials are more hawkish on Iran, including NSA Jake Sullivan. They feel it's the right time to strike. Iran's air defenses are weak, their proxies have been dismantled, so the regime is less likely to escalate after a strike. This is the best time. Then why is Biden hesitant? A, because he is a lame duck. If he attacks now, he will light another fire for Donald Trump. And B, Biden is not convinced about the evidence. Just think back to 2020. Biden promised that he would not allow Iran to make a nuclear bomb. Now there are two ways to do that. One is to revive the nuclear deal. The second is to blow up Iran's nuclear sites. Biden promised the first, to revive the deal, but he failed. And if he wants to do the second, that is blow up their nuclear sites, he needs evidence. Evidence that Iran is actively building a bomb. Now, in public, Tehran has denied such plans. The regime says it does not have nuclear ambitions. But American officials remain wary. Last month, Jake Sullivan suggested that Iran could change its nuclear doctrine. Listen to this.
What about Iran's nuclear program? And here, you can look at the public statements of Iranian officials, which have changed in the last few months as they have been dealt these strategic blows, to raise the question, do we have to change our doctrine at some point? It generates choices for that adversary that can be quite dangerous, and that's something we have to remain extremely vigilant about as we go forward.
So the US is worried about Iran's moves. Reports say Iranian officials conducted some suspicious research last year, some computer modeling and metallurgy, both linked to the nuclear program. This prompted the White House to send a private warning to Iran. So these concerns are not new. They have existed for a while. What's changed is Iran's position. The weakening of its proxies has left Tehran vulnerable, and a vulnerable regime could make the nuclear gamble. That is what Washington is worried about, because Biden's Iran legacy is already in the dumps. Under him, Iran got closer to the bomb. In 2021, Tehran began enriching uranium at 60%. Now, to put that in context, 90% is weapons-grade uranium. They were 60% in 2020. If you reach that level, the 90% level, you can make a bomb. Reports say Iran has enough enriched uranium to make 4 nuclear bombs. And how long would that take? The enrichment will take around 1 week, but making a warhead could take up to 1 year. It's still very little time for a nuke. It's yet another example of Biden's foreign policy failures. The question is, how will Donald Trump handle it? Last time, his Iran policy was clear: pressure, pressure, and more pressure. That's what Trump did. Indications are that he will pick where he left off. Maybe even take things up a notch, since Iran is weaker right now. And Tehran knows this too. Look at what their foreign minister said ahead of the new year. He said, and I'm quoting, 2025 will be an important year regarding Iran's nuclear issue. That's a veiled warning to Trump. If you increase the pressure, we will build a bomb. That's essentially what Iran is saying. And Trump won't mind that. It fits into his maverick strategy. He won't hold off on risky moves like Joe Biden. Last time, he ordered the strike that killed General Qasem Soleimani, arguably Iran's most important military leader. So expect the tensions to escalate once Trump comes in. I guess the Iranian minister was right in his assessment. 2025 will be a big year for Iran. In what way? Only time will tell. Now we turn to South Korea, where some real-life K-drama is unfolding. Their president was impeached last month. His name is Yoon Suk-yeol. Today, investigators tried to detain him, but they could not. They could not capture the deposed president. Thanks to his security detail and his supporters, they blocked the investigators. This drama began last month, when Yoon Suk-yeol tried to impose martial law on South Korea. He made the declaration on the 3rd of December, but his attempt failed. Members of parliament overturned the martial law decree, and then they impeached President Yoon for abusing his power as president. Now an investigation is underway. It is being conducted by a special agency called the CIO, the Corruption Investigation Office for High-Ranking Officials, CIO. This agency has summoned Yoon multiple times for questioning, but he refuses to show up. He has not made a public appearance for weeks now. He is believed to be holed up in his official residence. So the investigating agency, CIO, got tired of waiting. They got a warrant against Yoon. a warrant that allows them to detain him for 48 hours and to search his residence. This warrant expires on Monday, the 6th of January. The investigators were on the clock and they decided to act today. But Yoon's supporters saw it coming. They'd been gathering outside his residence to try and protect him from the investigators. The crowd was expected to swell over the weekend, so the investigators decided to move in today. Early this morning, about 20 officials made their way to Yoon's residence, but they were confronted by his supporters. So the investigators called for police backup. And their numbers swelled to around 150. Investigators plus the police, 150 people in all. About 100 of them managed to evade Yoon's supporters and they entered the presidential residence. But they were stopped again. This time by the Presidential Security Service, the PSS. Their job is to protect the president, even if he's been impeached. They're supposed to protect him. So they blocked the way to Yoon. There were about 200 people protecting the president, both PSS personnel and members of the military. These soldiers were under PSS command. Now, both these groups were heavily armed. They had parked buses and cars along the way to the president's house. These served as makeshift barriers. The PSS forces also made human chains, creating rows of armed resistance. They outnumbered the investigators 2 to 1. There was a tense standoff. It lasted almost 5.5 hours. Some scuffles also broke out between the investigators and the PSS. Eventually, the police decided to back down. They did not want to risk an all-out confrontation, and as they withdrew, Yoon's supporters cheered. They think they have won.
I'm here in front of the official residence of Yoon to save our country from the crisis. The Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials is trying to arrest the president in an illegal way, not in a legitimate way. So I came here today to prevent it.
The investigating agency, the CIO, is mulling its next move. Trying to detain Yoon again will be risky. His supporters will be emboldened by today's events. Their numbers kept swelling during the arrest attempt. They went from 1,000 to over 11,000 today. And the crowd might get even bigger over the weekend. And the warrant expires on Monday. So the investigators might wait for a new one before trying to detain Yoon again. Meanwhile, they have to deal with new legal hurdles. The Presidential Security Service, the PSS, is trying to charge the police with trespassing. They also say that the arrest warrant is invalid because the presidential residence is protected by law. You see, South Korean law does not allow searches at certain places, locations which could house military secrets, and the presidential residence is one such place. The PSS used this as a justification to deny the police entry. Complaints have been filed against the chief of the presidential guards. He's been accused of obstructing justice. But for the moment, the PSS seems to have come out on top. And Yoon Suk-yeol remains free. The question is, for how long? "2024 was a great year for Elon Musk. He made headlines every day. He bet on Donald Trump, and Trump won the US presidential election. He will have a lot of say in the next US government. He's impacting elections in other nations as well. 2024 was the year of Elon Musk, but the company that made him is not doing so well. I'm talking about Tesla. Its annual sales dropped for the first time in over a decade. In fact, it's a first in the company's history. So what led to this decline, and can Tesla thrive without Musk's undivided attention? Our next report tells you.
In October, Tesla came out with a surprise announcement. It revised its forecast for Q4. The company said it would sell around 515,000 cars in the quarter. This was more than the market expectations, but Tesla's been known to defy it. After all, this is the company that revolutionized the EV industry. So the market was optimistic. But this time, Tesla failed to deliver. The company's annual report is out. Tesla sold 495,570 vehicles in the fourth quarter. That's lower than the target it set for itself. More importantly, Tesla's annual sales have dropped, a first in more than 10 years. In fact, this is a first in Tesla's history since the company listed on the exchanges. In 2023, Tesla sold 1.8 million cars. In 2024, the company delivered around 1.79 million cars. It's a minor dip of around 1%. But for a company like Tesla, it's big news. At one point, the company was reporting annual sales growth of nearly 50%. In 2023, its sales went up by 37% from the previous year. So this annual drop in sales is definitely surprising. Tesla stocks dropped by nearly 7% after the news. So what caused this decline? Well, there are several factors at play. Number one is competition. Tesla was the undoubted leader of the EV market, but now it has a new competitor, China's BYD. BYD sold 1.76 million electric vehicles in 2024, which is very close to Tesla's annual sales. More importantly, BYD sold 90% of its cars in China. The second reason is slowing demand. China is a key market for Tesla, yet it's losing ground to rivals like BYD. In other regions as well, demand is slowing down, like the United States and Europe. Last year, Tesla even lowered prices on repeated occasions. This was an attempt to get more buyers. But price cuts come with consequences. While they can boost sales in the short term, they also erode profit margins. But beyond all of this, there's the elephant in the room, Elon Musk. He had quite the eventful year.
Take over, Elon, just take over.
He backed the right candidate in the United States elections, and he has the ears of the US president-elect. He will head a presidential advisory commission, DOGE. He's wading into elections in other countries, and he and his social media platform X are making headlines, and not always for the right reasons.
Sure.
Now that's a problem, because let's face it, Musk is Tesla. His vision, drive and personality are deeply woven into the company's DNA. But now his focus is divided. Between political drama, X and space launches, Tesla seems to be losing its edge. And this raises a crucial question. What happens to Tesla if Musk continues to be distracted? Or worse, if he steps away completely? Without Musk's hands-on leadership, Tesla may face a bleak future, especially in an EV market that's becoming more competitive every day. But Musk believes there's nothing to fear. In fact, he's made a bold prediction for 2025. Musk plans to grow vehicle sales by 30% next year. His ambitious forecast is based on two things: a new, cheaper model that will be released and enthusiasm for self-driving software. Wall Street, however, remains skeptic. Tesla has always been about defying odds, and it has the potential to do so again. But without Musk's full attention, the road to a sustainable future might be rockier than ever. Can Tesla find its footing again, or will it struggle without the undivided attention of its maverick CEO? Only time will tell.
Not just Tesla, Elon Musk's other company could also be in trouble. I'm talking about SpaceX, more specifically its subsidiary Starlink. Reports say the government of India is investigating Starlink. Why? Because smugglers and insurgents are using it to access the internet. You see, Starlink has not been approved by India's government. They cannot be sold or used in India. Yet, miscreants are doing exactly that. We've seen two major instances recently. The first was in November last year. Indian authorities seized a boat near Andaman and Nicobar Islands. It was loaded with drugs worth $4 billion, and the smugglers were using Starlink. That's how they navigated through Indian waters. The second instance was in December. Officials in Manipur were carrying out search operations. They seized 29 weapons from insurgents and along with it, a Starlink device. So that's 2 discoveries in 2 months, both in very dangerous situations. As you know, Manipur is going through a period of ethnic violence. More than 250 people have been killed, more than 60,000 have been displaced. So the security situation is tense there. To contain the flare-ups, the government has often shut down the internet. It's common practice in conflict zones. The idea is to prevent rumors and fake news from spreading. But the insurgents have found a solution in Starlink. Even when the internet is shut, Starlink works. Neighboring Myanmar has approved Elon Musk's company, which is probably why it works in Manipur too. Reports say insurgents use it across different parts of the state, especially when internet is shut down. But Elon Musk has rejected these claims. He says the satellite beams over India are turned off. So Starlink will not work in Manipur. I'm afraid evidence on the ground does not support him. But that's not the only problem here. After these seizures, New Delhi has been asking Starlink to cooperate. They can reveal crucial information here, like who bought these devices and when were they bought. Also, how were they used? This information could help Indian authorities to crack the case, to figure out how Starlink is being misused, but the company has refused. They say sharing such data will violate privacy laws. In other words, Starlink is not cooperating with India. Maybe that's what pushed the government to act. The Home Ministry has ordered the Department of Telecommunications to investigate. It has been asked to take appropriate steps. Now, this could be a headache for Elon Musk because he is very keen to enter the Indian market. We have more than 800 million internet users in this country, and chances are that number will keep rising. But to enter this market, Starlink needs government approval. In 2022, they applied for a license. It's called the GMPCS, Global Mobile Personal Communication by Satellite. It's issued for a period of 20 years, and it allows companies to offer internet services in India. Starlink is yet to get that. Apparently, the government has a few security concerns. Some of them have been addressed by Starlink, but they claim certain government conditions are technically impossible. And that's where the matter is now. Starlink is hoping to find some sort of a middle ground, though I'm guessing such actions won't help them. Every country will prioritize safety and national security, and all companies must respect that, even if you're owned by Donald Trump's +1. Now let's turn our attention to Venezuela. This South American country is back in the news for its post-poll chaos. And this time, even a bounty is involved. A bounty for the capture of Edmundo Gonzalez, the opposition candidate who claimed victory in the July elections. That's when President Nicolas Maduro cracked down. He issued arrest warrants, so Gonzalez fled the country. But Maduro wants to end this game of cat and mouse. He wants to know where Gonzalez is. And now he has offered a reward of $100,000 for the exiled candidate's capture. Will this strategy work? Why is the president of an economically distressed country going to such lengths? And what does it mean for Venezuela? Here's a report.
Soon, you may see a wanted poster plastered on the streets of Venezuela, displayed at airports and police checkpoints, and it would have one face, the face of Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia, the exiled opposition candidate. Because Venezuela wants to know where he is and capture him. So much so that they've declared a hefty reward of $100,000 for the information. Initially, they promised to pay $500,000, but this economically distressed South American country quickly scaled that back. The question is, why are they going through all of this? To understand why, let's go back to July 28th, when Nicolas Maduro claimed victory against Gonzalez in the country's election. The opposition cried foul. They showed numbers from polling stations showing that Gonzalez won by a big margin. Despite this, Maduro claimed a third 6-year term. He resisted intense pressure, both at home and abroad, to release the poll results. And he cracked down hard on dissent. Street protests devolved into violent clashes with the police. 28 people died, 200 people were injured, and more than 2,400 people were arrested. Plus, Venezuela hit Gonzalez with charges of conspiracy and racketeering. Authorities ordered his arrest. So in the month of September, he fled the country. He went to Spain, where he was granted political asylum. And Maduro wished him well.
What I can say to Gonzalez, with whom I have had a heated exchange since the July electoral dispute, is that I have been following all of this very closely, and I understand and respect the step he has taken to go into exile in Spain. I hope that his new course and his new life will go well.
But this sentiment has changed, slowly and surely. While on exile, Gonzalez has reiterated that he won the polls. He has been outspoken about the crackdown that followed, and he has vowed to return. Gonzalez claims that his exile is only temporary.
I'm not tired of saying it and of stressing it with all the force I feel capable of. My departure from the country is only temporary. But I was still forced to leave Venezuela because of unspeakable pressures and extreme threats that touched even the closest part of my family life.
Gonzalez wants to return to the troubled country within the next week, before January 10th. That's when Maduro is due to take the oath of office. Gonzalez wants to be sworn in as president instead, but Maduro wants to cling to power. And now he's taking this desire to another level by demanding Gonzalez's capture and offering a reward for it. Will Maduro, who has overseen the fall of this oil-rich country into economic ruin, be able to capture his opposition candidate? We'll find out in a few days.
It's a new year. That means new resolutions to eat healthy, to save money, to invest in more assets, maybe luxury assets. So what should you buy this year? One popular answer is diamonds. As the old advertising pitch goes, diamonds are forever. But if you're counting on them as a forever investment, you may want to reconsider, and I will tell you why. Diamonds have a romantic allure. Decades of marketing have made them a cultural fixture, especially the diamond engagement ring. Stores market them as rare, customers rush to buy them. And that has long obscured their economic reality. The fact is, diamonds are not rare. Their prices are marked up astronomically, and they are terrible at retaining value. Their value hinges on the so-called 4 C's: cut, color, clarity, and carat weight. But even these metrics are subjective. Their interpretation varies from one appraisal to the next. In the world of investments, that's a red flag. Consider this. You buy a diamond, you walk out of the store clutching the box, and the moment you're out, the diamond inside has already depreciated by almost 50% as per some estimates. Moreover, diamonds are illiquid. Turning it into cash is like squeezing water from a stone. There's no standardized exchange for diamonds, no universal pricing mechanism. A diamond's resale value depends on its grade, but it also depends on the whims of the buyer and the market. Let me show you a graph. If you bought a diamond in 2002, chances are you will get the same money for it today. And if you add inflation to this, you're basically losing money. Then there's the threat of lab-grown diamonds. They are identical to their natural counterparts, but they cost a fraction of the price. And don't get us wrong, we are not saying diamonds have no worth. They hold sentimental value, they sparkle at parties, and they glitter in the glow of an engagement announcement. But as an investment strategy, the financial promise is lackluster. What about other assets like bags and watches? Let's start with luxury watches. Their market has seen a steady rise in recent years, the likes of Rolex, Patek Philippe, and Audemars Piguet. Some of these watches cost more than a country's GDP. Many are synonymous with timeless value. What sets them apart is their rarity. Limited editions are the name of the game, and they're not just status symbols. The right timepiece can also be a ticking asset. Consider this. A Rolex Daytona bought decades ago can fetch you a fortune today. It was introduced at around $8,000. The pre-owned market value has risen to $19,000. But the key here is knowing the market, because not all watches appreciate. In fact, on an average, luxury watch prices have declined by 40% in 2 years. Even the Rolex CEO says watches are not an investment. So make your choice carefully. The same policy applies to luxury handbags. Their value is not just in the leather. It is in the legend behind the brand. Take an Hermes bag, for example. Birkins can double in value in 5 years. Kellys, too, often have a high return. In 2020, these bags saw an average return of 38%. And that's because of their exclusivity. Some even outperform gold in appreciation. It's simple economics, limited supply and high demand. That's what works for them. That makes them a top-performing asset. But not all bags are Birkins. And most do not hold the same allure. There's also fine art. Auction houses trumpet record-breaking sales. Galleries spin tales of scarcity and prestige. Yet behind all of this is an opaque market. Of course, a Picasso will always be valuable. But unlike other assets, art lacks standard metrics of value. It depends on a plethora of things, like the artist's reputation, market trends, and even the whims of collectors. So while some paintings appreciate in value, the vast majority quietly stagnate. In 2023, the average piece of artwork sold at auction decreased by 32%. So this is a problem across all luxury assets. None of these markets are foolproof. Bags can wear out, watches need maintenance, art can lose its charm, and trends can shift. So before you splurge, do ask yourself this: do you love the item enough to hold it? Because in luxury investing, passion often trumps profit. The bottom line is this: luxury assets can add glamour to your portfolio, but treat them as the cherry on top, not the whole cake. The best investment strategy, as always, is diversification. Whether it's stocks, real estate, or even bonds, luxury assets can be the sparkle, but not the foundation. A row is brewing in Europe between Ukraine and Slovakia. The bone of contention is gas, Russian natural gas to be specific. On New Year's Day, Ukraine shut off gas supplies from Russia. The supplies were part of a 5-year-old deal. Kiev was obligated to let Russian gas flow through its territory. Despite the war, this gas flowed. But that deal ended on the 31st of December, so Ukraine shut the pipes. This had a knock-on effect. It affected countries downstream, especially Ukraine's neighbor, Slovakia. And now, Slovakia is furious. Their Prime Minister, Robert Fico, has vowed to retaliate. He's targeting Ukrainian refugees in his country. Our next report has the details.
Slovakia has become collateral damage in the Russia-Ukraine war. The Central European nation borders Ukraine. It has long had a give-and-take relationship with Kyiv. It gives Ukraine electricity and it takes Russian natural gas. That has been the situation since 1991. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia, the main successor state, continued to use Soviet-era pipelines to export natural gas. These pipelines flowed through Ukraine into Slovakia and then onwards to the rest of Europe. Slovakia was both a consumer and a transit nation. This meant transit fees that Slovakia has been raking in for decades now. But that money stopped flowing on Wednesday along with the Russian gas. This has enraged Slovakia Prime Minister Robert Fico. On New Year's Day, he made this speech.
In world politics, it absolutely applies that it does not matter whether elephants love or fight. The grass always suffers. I do not want Slovakia to be such grass as we see these days when the transit of gas through Ukraine is stopped, which will have drastic impacts on all of us in the European Union, but not on the Russian Federation.
Fico accused the European Union of trampling on Slovakia's interests. He said his country was collateral damage in the war between Russia and the West. And Fico holds Ukraine responsible for this. Slovakia will lose out because of Ukraine's decision to stop the gas flow. They will lose about 500 million euros in transit fees. That's about $518 million at today's exchange rate. Losing more than $500 million is bound to sting, And Fico is furious. He has accused Ukraine of sabotage, and yesterday he threatened to retaliate.
I announced that we are ready to negotiate and agree in a coalition to stop electricity supplies and significantly reduce subsidies for citizens of Ukraine who are located on the territory of the Slovak Republic.
He is preparing two measures. First, he wants to stop sending electricity to Ukraine. This could plunge the war-torn nation into a deeper crisis, especially as Russia keeps targeting the Ukrainian energy grid. But Kyiv may have a solution to this. Poland says it's ready to help. It will step in if Slovakia pulls the plug. This would thwart Fico's first plan. So he's come up with a second one. He plans to cut subsidies to Ukrainian refugees who are living in Slovakia. There are almost 7 million Ukrainian refugees spread across the world. Slovakia houses over 130,000 of them. Fico says that he will stop supporting these refugees unless his demands are met.
The only alternative for a sovereign Slovakia is renewal of transit or demanding compensation mechanisms that will replace the loss in public finances in the amount of almost 500 million euros.
Either the gas transit should restart or Slovakia should be paid off. That is Fico's ultimatum. It's the latest salvo in the escalating rivalry between Ukraine and Slovakia. Fico and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky have been butting heads for weeks. Fico was trying his best to get the gas transit deal renewed. He even flew down to Moscow to talk to Russian President Vladimir Putin in person. Zelensky was livid when this happened and accused him of opening a second energy front against Ukraine. He also said the Slovakian Prime Minister was acting on Putin's orders. Now Fico has hit back with his threat against Ukrainian refugees. The Russia-Ukraine war is driving wedges in European unity. It's creating new rivalries and exacerbating tensions. And ultimately, it's ordinary people who pay the price.
Let me tell you about Talakwa. She is 25 years old, she's a mother, and she is an orca, a killer whale, the ocean's top predator. And this week, all eyes are on her because she's grieving. Talakwa is swimming on the northwest US coast while clinging onto a carcass, the body of her dead calf, nudging it with her snout, trying to put it over her head and gripping its fin with her teeth. It takes so much of her energy that she is unable to forage for food. Talakwa's family swims alongside. They help when they can. But the orca single-mindedly clings to her dead child for as long as possible, making sure that the waves do not sweep it away. Just as she did in 2018 when she carried another dead calf for 17 days across 1,600 kilometers. Back then, she made headlines. Her story captivated the world. And now her grief is surprising people again, partly because it is a moving display of emotion, but mainly because it is so hard to believe, although it shouldn't be. Killer whales are apex predators of the waters. They can grow up to 27 feet long. They weigh as much as 6,000 kilograms, but orcas are a lot like humans. They're extremely intelligent. They have their own languages with clicks and whistles, and they're quite cosmopolitan. They swim through every one of the world's oceans. Plus, they have the same hormones and the same neurotransmitters or chemical messengers as us. So while humans often monopolize emotions, experts say we don't have the market cornered on them. Orcas and humans have similar emotions. We both value social bonds. And mother orcas make lifelong sacrifices for their children. So if there is one thing we can take away from an orca's grief, it is this. The calf's death is not just devastating for her, it is a loss for the whole world. Because you see, killer whales are in danger. Around Canada and the US waters, these whales are part of an ailing population. In the early 1900s, their population stood at 200. Today, it has dropped to 73. They don't have enough food. There is too much noise pollution, water pollution, and habitat loss. Now the whales are on the brink of extinction. Along the South African coast, their ecosystem is in crisis. Orcas are not getting enough nutrition. So over the past few years, they have upped their game quite literally. Now they're killing great white sharks, which is unprecedented. These sharks are one of the ocean's most fearsome predators, but they're getting killed in less than 2 minutes. And this is driving the sharks away, changing the orca's behavior and causing a worrying ecological shift. The worry carries along the Strait of Gibraltar as well. This is one of the busiest waterways in the world, but now a mystery is unfolding here. Orcas are sinking boats. They're ramming into rudders, making vessels inoperable and biting pieces of the boats. Over the past 5 years, around 700 orca run-ins have been recorded. In the last, at least 6 yachts and boats have sunk. And these encounters are so frequent, the Spanish authorities have issued an alert. #Orca uprising has gone viral. And of course, there are memes saying capsize the rich. Sure, we can find the fun in this, but these attacks are terrifying and surprising. Orcas are generally peaceful, especially to humans. So no one is sure why this is happening, why they're attacking boats, why they're eating sharks, and why so many calves are dying. But experts have a fair idea. They say we are to blame, us humans. We have exploited and gradually destroyed orca habitats. And now we are too confused or too amused to do any better. So orcas can grieve their children and we can pretend to care. But it doesn't matter until we fight for the killer whales. Foreign ministers from Germany and France are visiting Syria. It's their outreach to the new regime in Damascus. And fun fact, the new Syrian rulers are still on the European Union's terror list, a minor inconvenience that Berlin and Paris ignored. And it actually gets worse. Before the trip, the German foreign minister was pretty hopeful. She talked about a reset with Syria. She said she was going to Damascus with a quote-unquote outstretched hand. Those were her exact words, outstretched hand. Unfortunately, nobody is shaking that outstretched hand. You see, the new Syrian rulers are conservative Islamists. Shaking a woman's hand is beneath them. So everywhere the minister went, the officials avoided shaking her hand. At the airport, at the presidential palace, and during meetings. What's worse, she looked on as they shook hands with her junior officials. If this isn't a reality check, I don't know what is. Now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. A massive, mysterious metal ring from space crashes into a Kenyan village. In the UK, scientists discover a dinosaur highway dating back 166 million years. And the London Zoo conducts its annual stock take, counting over 10,000 animals. Finally, we're taking you back in history on this day in 1924. The sarcophagus of Tutankhamun was uncovered. King Tut was an ancient Egyptian pharaoh. His mummy had been preserved for 3,000 years before it was discovered. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend.